Okay, so today we'll be covering pitching and we'll be looking at a 7-step pitch framework. And that framework is designed to be more consultative in terms of B2B sales. It's also going to be a very interactive session today. So we are going to move you into breakout rooms very shortly, and we'll explain what happens in those breakout rooms as we go. It would be great if you could have your cameras on in those breakout rooms, so it's nice to see each other's faces. And yeah, if you could just keep microphones muted in the background, that would be fabulous. So let's have a little bit of a recap. I don't know about you, but it seems like the sessions last week were a long time ago, even though we're only on Tuesday this week. And there was a lot of information that we've been given by the speakers. So we thought it'd be helpful just to do a little bit of a recap. In the first session, we heard from pharmaceutical and crop science experts who explained the pharmaceutical business model and its complex ecosystem, including decision makers, influencers, and of course the patient at the center of that system, which causes some challenges for them when they start to think about omni-channel and how to promote their products. We also heard that AI offers a range of opportunities for pharmaceutical and crop science solutions, but it's very early days there. And from a crop science perspective, we know that it plays an important role in terms of creating stability in agriculture as farmers and growers are faced with challenging loss of arable lands and responding to climate change, etc. And I think most importantly, we wanted to give you some context of pharmaceutical and the crop industry science because it is so important to understand those sectors, especially if you want to work with Bayer or similar companies like Bayer. The second module in the session, the key takeaways were the role of sustainability in the value chain, why sustainability is business critical. And I think Olaf mentioned this when he was talking, especially in terms of how not embracing ESG and sustainability will limit access to markets, not only today, but also in the future. And also how suppliers can support Bayer with their sustainability targets. And not to forget, also a big part of this is human rights and the importance for suppliers to honour human rights at every part of the value chain. So moving on to today, we're going to shift the focus from the pharmaceutical and sustainability topics, and we are going to look at this 7-step framework for customer conversations. In this session, we'll be creating a compelling story arc. You'll get to practice the story arc in breakout rooms, and then at the end of the session, we will cover the brief for the video pitch and we'll answer any questions that we've not answered already. So before we do that, one final time, we did Slido again yesterday. We've gone more advanced this time. We've got word clouds and everything. So we're hoping the technology will be kind to us for one last session. But if you could scan the QR code and head to Slido, we've got 2 questions that we'd like to ask you. Okay. Give it one more second. And I think let's move on to the next question. Okay, so who enjoys selling? That's okay, Sabine. You can always message in the chat. How do you feel about selling, Sabine?
I love selling. It's my main job because I have to get my 8 people
Yep,
in the job. So I only sell.
yep, that's great. How about everybody else? Okay. Angela, do you want to reveal the results? Oh, we've got a good split today. So yesterday we had a lot of the group were in the maybe category. They weren't too sure how they felt about it. And I think maybe we had about 40 or 50% in the yes, and then the rest in the no category. And I think for me personally, if you ask me if I like selling, I think I'd be inclined to say no. But if you ask me if I like meeting new clients and talking to them about their challenges and helping them solve them, I think I'd say yes. And I think sometimes sales can get a bad press because it often comes across as quite aggressive and cold and impersonal. But I definitely think if you are focused on your client, then it can be a nice experience and all about the conversation. So if we
This
go,
is the female type of selling.
yes, I think you're right. So if we go into the next question. So what do you think from the client's perspective that they're looking for when you're pitching to them? And it'd be great if you could just use 3 words, and we should have a nice word cloud appear. A few more people typing. Give it a couple more minutes, seconds really. Okay, you've still got a little, we'll reveal the answers and there's still a little bit time. It's dynamic, so it will still feed the information as we get it. So Angela, do you want to go to the word? Oh, the word cloud worked again. That's okay, Claudia. You can always put any response in the chat. Ideas, solution, personal connection. Yep, very important. And very similar to yesterday, solutions was also a big part of the response that we had from everybody who joined the call. Unique, authentic, listener, understanding. Yep, I think authenticity is really important. That's come up a few times. We didn't have that yesterday, actually. Focused. Yes, I think that's super important. We're going to talk about that very shortly. Focused on their company and security. Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So I think if you enjoy selling or you find it challenging, I think we can all agree that generating and selling is definitely sometimes a difficult role. And also, I think it's getting harder. And I think sometimes it's getting harder, partly because it's harder to cut through and gain that client's or customer's attention initially, but also the customer's expectations are increasing. So there's some great research out there from salesforce.com. They do a survey called the State of Sales. I'd really recommend you checking it out. I've included the link in the Q&A that we'll send out after this as well. And they conducted some research, and they found that actually 81% of buyers conduct research before they reach out. And I guess that might be new to you. It might not be new to you, but what that suggests is that, and what the survey suggests is that the customers, when they do reach out to suppliers, they're really well informed about the solutions that are out there. They're also contacting suppliers much later in the sales cycle, and they're often spending less time with sales representatives. And when they do have a conversation, they have a good understanding of what's available in the market. So the kind of takeaway from that is if you're not prepared for a well-informed purchaser, that you're potentially going to lose credibility when talking to these individuals, or if your sales teams aren't prepared. The survey also looked at what buyers expected from the sellers that they talked to. And it was interesting that 80% of buyers expect sales reps to act as trusted advisors. So customers are well informed, but as you, I'm sure, have all found when looking for supplies yourself, they can get overwhelmed by all the different choices, all the different information out there. And so they are looking for somebody who can help guide and consult on the best way forward and not to overload them with too much information. And also, the survey says that sales experience is one of the biggest drivers of customer loyalty. And so 53% of customer loyalty was driven by the sales experience, not necessarily the brand or even the product, but the salesperson and their interaction with that salesperson is key. So, what does this mean from a customer perspective? And it sounds really obvious, but I think the first bit is that it's really important to do your research. And I know lots of people kind of go, I know, of course, it all makes sense. But I think given the roles that we all have, and some of us will often play multiple roles as well as being that salesperson trying to generate new business for the organizations that we work for, sometimes the research step can get skipped. And just to emphasize, based on the research and conversations with clients, it's really important that clients do that suppliers do that research. When we spoke with Bayer Procurement in particular, we asked them what was standing out to them in terms of working with new suppliers. And they said, actually, the ones that do their research can speak their language, and I mean, not necessarily the country-based language, but the language of the business, and understand their needs, were really stood out to them. And if you think about Bayer and the conversations that we've had so far, I mean, Bayer have some really big challenges to overcome. They're responding to climate change, they're staying relevant to ESG, they need to gain access to new markets, and also they have those long research cycles, and there's not necessarily a guarantee that those products are going to be successful in terms of their launch. And that's not even mentioning all the kind of legal perspectives that they have. So there's a lot really to learn there when you're dealing with these clients. Secondly, customers are looking for their supplies to add value, and especially as part of that sales conversation, they're really looking for supplies to consult. And so customers seek out sellers that teach them something new. Um, and we've heard that really from the speakers that we've spoken to. I think it was Cecilia who was talking about AI. They recognize that they've got these opportunities, but they don't necessarily know how to achieve those opportunities. And they do need that consultation and support to help them get there. Finally, customers are looking for you to have an open two-way conversation, and they are looking for you to challenge them. And we're going to have a look a little bit more about what this means for you in terms of selling. So the rest of this session is based on a framework and from a book called The Challenger Sale. And again, we will share that link as part of the Q&A. And it was written by, I'm sorry, I had to apologize yesterday. It was written by two gentlemen, one called Max Dixon and one called Brett Adamson. And they researched 6,000 plus salespeople in 90 companies across a lot of different industries. And they did that because they wanted to determine what made salespeople successful. And that thinking was consolidated in their book, which was called Challenger Sale. I do have to say, there are so many sales frameworks out there. And again, I've got a link to this in the Q&A. And like all frameworks, it might not be relevant to all situations. But for me personally, when reading the book and having used some of their techniques, I found it really helpful in terms of pitching and winning new work. From their book, the summary, if we go on to the next slide, really suggested that they talked about different personas of salespeople, and there were like 5 or 6 different personas. And the persona that they saw that was the most successful was a challenger persona. And what it means to be a challenger persona, they had these characteristics that they saw time and time again. And those characteristics were the salesperson taught their customers something new and valuable about how to compete in their market. They tailored their sales pitch. Again, it sounds quite obvious, but not everybody does tailor those sales pitches to resonate with the decision makers' hot button issues. And they took control of the discussions around pricing and challenging the customer's thinking around the problem. The book does go in a lot more detail about the personas, how to coach sales teams, etc. But our focus for the rest of the session is going to be made up of their framework for a best-in-class teaching pitch. So this is the part where we are going to get very interactive. Feel free to take notes or screenshots that might help you in the breakout rooms. I'll explain the plan for today, and then we'll do a quick overview of the framework before we start to break out into the breakout sessions. So first of all, we'll go through the 7-step pitch process, so that way you can get an understanding of the whole story. We're then going to split into small groups of about 3. There might be the odd group of 2, and we're going to work through that 7-step pitch process. We're all going to work off the same pitch, and we've got a fictional brief, which I'll tell you about very shortly. And then as we go through each section, I'll talk through each step, and we'll do 2 steps at a time. We'll then break out, so that way you can write a short statement that fulfills that pitch, and it'll make a bit more sense as we go into the next section. We'll come back after each breakout room. We'll do a little bit of feedback and sharing some of the pitches, and then we'll repeat until we've completed all 7 stages. So hopefully that makes sense for now, and we'll explain some more details as we go on. So the basis of this framework is all about storytelling, and whether or not you use this framework or another one, I think we can all agree that storytelling is really important in pitching, especially with new clients. It's definitely a methodology we as humans have been using for thousands of years, and it helps us educate, entertain, inspire. And so, yeah, this framework will walk, I guess this framework is based on an emotional journey that starts off with getting the customer intrigued. Then the customer will feel overwhelmed and then invested before they see a way out. So to do this, we take the customer on a journey, and we first build their credibility. So if Angela, you click, we can see the first 3 steps. Thank you. So first of all, we're going to build credibility. Then we move up to the 2nd step, which is where we reframe the solution and we give them some really good insight. We then quantify the impact before we then move on to the next stage, which is where we want to tell the human story behind that impact. And we want to explain to them really what the risk is with this human story if they don't take action. And this is the lowest part of the journey before we show the customer that there's a new way forward. And we do that. I know it's very tempting to do that by telling them what your solution is, but we would encourage you to introduce a generic solution, and I'll explain why as we go through the next slides. Because the generic solution really needs to be objective, and they need to see that there's a fix for the problem. We then introduce your solution and why it's unique and best placed to overcome the challenges that that client faces. We've introduced a 7th step in the framework, which isn't covered in the Challenger sale, and that's all around next steps and close, because we want to make sure that there's a real clear call to action for your customers. So you might want to take a screenshot here because this might be a useful reference as we go into those breakout rooms. Okay, so moving on to the brief. I apologize, this is a fictional brief, but we wanted something that hopefully would seem familiar to everybody on this call. We understand that you're not all events agencies, but hopefully you've attended events or organised birthday parties or weddings, etc. And so you're familiar with the kind of what makes a good event. So our fictional RFP, the clients, Bayer and WeConnect, are organising an event in September at Bayer's HQ in Germany to celebrate the successful completion of their Elevate mentoring programme. It's the first time such an event has been organised. The event will be attended by women-owned business mentees, Bayer mentors, and senior leadership from both Bayer and WeConnect. There is a project manager on the team, but no one on the team has organised an event before, which we know isn't quite true. But the client is looking for an agency to coordinate and manage the event. And this should include areas such as the event experience, logistics, food and drink, and the client is going to be pre-screening agencies in a 5-minute video call. So in the breakout rooms, we are going to be playing the role of the event agency, and you are going to be over the next 30 or 40 minutes working through this 5-minute pitch for this pre-screening session. So if you want to take a screenshot, this will be useful information for your breakout areas. Okay, so what's going to happen now, I'll explain each step, and I'll give you some examples of the kind of statements that you can use. And then when you're in your breakout sessions, I want you to use the information that we provide here to figure out what that statement would be in the context of the RFP, which is the event for Bayer and WeConnect. So the first step, and it's not a mistake, it's actually the final step. And you wouldn't use this step first in your pitch process, it would come at the end. But before you start creating the pitch, we would always recommend that you think about what your goal is in terms of this client, the work, and what you want to achieve from your pitch. And so I do have to admit, actually, I am a bit guilty of not doing this when I come to pitching to my own customers. And when I remember, I find that actually my pitch is a lot more effective, and I actually get the information that I need from the client. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. So when we think about the next steps and close, we're really thinking about 3 different areas. So what is the action that we would like the client to take? So what do you want to happen as a result of this meeting? And if it's another meeting, what is the purpose or goal of that meeting? The second area is close. So how are you going to get agreement? How do you close the customer? And we'll be looking at closing techniques in the next slide. And then commit. Is there a sign or an indication that you could get from the client in terms of what would indicate their commitment? So in a scenario you might face, it might be getting them to sign a contract, raise a PO. In this case, we're looking at trying to get through the pre-screening round. So yeah, what would signal that commitment from the client? So looking at some closing techniques, and again, you might just want to take a screenshot of this so you've got it for your breakout areas. There's lots of different closing techniques out there, and Google and ChatGPT are great at providing lots of different ideas. I've just included a selection here, but when we talk about closing techniques, we're really thinking about sentences or statements that we can communicate to the client, which will hopefully move this pitch on beyond I'll get back to you, which is sometimes the response that we get from clients. So it's really that call to action. There's different styles. One style could be an assumptive close. So for example, when should we get started? Another close could be a time limited close. Again, depends on what you're selling to customers, but it could be everyday cost money. I think for me, you have to play around with these closes. And I don't know if it's being a woman, some of them feel a bit too pushy. And so one of the closes that I do like to use, which I find is very helpful on pitch calls, is that I sometimes struggle with pitch calls getting objections from the client within the call. Everything looks good, it's wonderful, but yeah, they don't seem to be committing either. And so one of the closes that I tend to use, again, so that way I can get feedback, I can objection handle on the call, is based on what we've discussed. Do you feel our service or our solution meets your need? And then you're prompting that client to then give you feedback live on that call, because as we know, sometimes they disappear. You can get a yes or a no, but you don't ever necessarily get the feedback that you're looking for as a solution. So yeah, that would be my top tip in terms of closes. So moving on to stage one. So now we've thought about our goal, we've thought about the call to action that we want for our client, we can start building the pitch from step one. So often with sales calls, depending on the salesperson, they can ask the client to do a lot of the work. And instead, what the challenger persona does is look to change the nature of a sales call. So rather than leading with questions, they lead with understanding and knowledge. So that way, the customer instantly feels like they've done their research, they're not wasting their time, and that they understand their business. And it doesn't mean that you don't ask any questions, because it does need to be a two-way conversation. But rather than starting the conversation with something like, what is your biggest challenge? You could start the conversation with something that's going to establish your credibility. So it could be a line like, in my experience working with companies in your sector, I've noticed a common challenge related to AI is this. How does your company currently address this? So with just one sentence, rather than asking the customer, how does your organization currently address AI, you've already established that you understand AI, if that's what your business is about. You understand common challenges because you've got experience working with existing clients and customers. And then you can go on to ask them questions to understand their organization. But it just helps warm up the client that you've actually done research about their organization. So some examples of this, again, you might want to jot some of these down to see if it helps as part of your breakout room. It could be a statement like, many businesses like yours are struggling with knowing how to adapt to multi-generational working. How are you finding that? I understand that your top priority is to launch in new markets. We found that that working in the UK is challenging. How are you finding it? We've recently partnered with a company very similar to yours who needed help with global events targeted at women around the world. And so it's those kind of statements that, again, are going to just build credibility within the first few seconds of your conversation. So let's put this into action. We're going to split you into groups. You'll be in breakout rooms. We'll give you 8 minutes for the first one, and then each breakout room will be 5 minutes after that. We'll keep you in the same groups for the duration of this call. Just a reminder, we can't see the chats in the breakout rooms. So when you go into the room, if you ask a question in that chat, we can't see it. So it's not that we're ignoring you, and I'll try and drop into as many breakout rooms as possible to make sure that you're okay. So in that breakout room, you're going to be practicing steps 7 and 1. And so your first action is to decide what the call to action is for Bayer and WeConnect. So you're going into this pre-screening call. What's your call to action for that client? What do you want them to do? How are you going to close this? The next step is going to be step 1. So we want you to write a sentence or 2 sentences that are just going to help Bayer and WeConnect understand that actually you're credible in the event space or within pharmaceutical or the women network. You know a lot about WeConnect's goals already. Hopefully you've learned a lot about Bayer's goals over the last week or so. So yeah, think about why you're engaging, what's happening in the customer world, and why they should listen to you. And as I said, it's all fictional. This exercise is just for fun. It's not going to be assessed or count towards any selection criteria. We're just trying to help establish the methodology and understanding of the framework. Okay, so also don't worry, it might be a bit messy this first time around, but as we complete this stage and we move into the second breakout room, it will hopefully make more sense. Any questions? There's one here.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, should we prepare as a group one solution, or should it be individual solutions from every one of the group?
One solution per group.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. Well, we'll move you into breakout rooms.
We were interrupted in our discussion. We were still speaking.
I know Zoom is a
We're
bit.
not finished yet.
That's okay. We can work it all out together. But yeah, Zoom's a bit brutal. It kind of cuts you after that 60 seconds. So is there a volunteer who'd like to tell the group what their call to action is and also what that warmer line is going to be?
So I can. So I didn't write anything. So we were just discussing the hello and welcome part. So I would say since 1992, we are developing and creating live events and brand experiences for impressions that last.
Yep. I think that's a great credibility piece. You've spoken about your heritage. You talk about kind of you create a good impression in terms of events. So yeah, that's a good start.
And our just to add our call to action, we'd be happy to receive your detailed RFP on short notice.
Oh, that is excellent. Yes, as we all know, RFPs are very short notice. So yeah, that shows willingness. And yeah, no, that's great. I think you could make it a little bit more assumptive, maybe, by saying, when will we receive your detailed RFP? And we're happy to work on it at short notice. But yeah, that's very good. I did join one breakout room, and I think one aspect of this warmer, if it's not as part of your pitch already, is that you're going to be a potential supplier or partner of WeConnect and Bayer. We know that women-owned businesses are really important to Bayer, and it's the sole mandate of WeConnect. So if you're a woman-owned events company and you haven't got that in your opening line, then we definitely recommend that you add that. And also, I think outside of this fictional RFP, if you are working with any companies and you know they have a supplier diversity program, then definitely remember to include that as part of your opening statements. Okay, you did wonderfully, thank you. And so hopefully you've now got a sense of the structure for the next steps. So we're going to move on quickly to stage 2, which is all about introducing your POV. So once you've built your credibility, you are then going to move to the second stage. And part of the challenger persona again is that they tend to reframe the status quo. And they do that with the intention that they are looking at the problem in a different way to how the client is tackling it at the moment. So challengers come prepared to describe why and how the problem the customer is experiencing is connected to a more troublesome issue than they realized. And a great simple explanation of this, which I found whilst I was researching these slides, is that actually a customer might be taking paracetamol for back pain. A challenger persona would approach this not by trying to sell them a different brand of paracetamol, but actually they would try and find out the source of the back pain. And perhaps it's sitting in an uncomfortable chair or it's an uncomfortable mattress, and they would present a better solution that isn't necessarily just switching your painkiller brand. I hope that makes sense. So how do you build this point of view? this is one of the hardest parts of the entire framework. And I think you'd feel a lot more comfortable about it if you weren't in an event scenario and you're probably thinking about your own business and talking to clients that you're used to talking to. So I personally watch lots of architecture TV shows, and architects often talk about how much a challenging plot or a challenging client brief or a tiny budget leads to the most creative solutions. And that's really how I want you to think about the POV. It's about embracing the challenge that the client has, so that way you can tell them about your creative solution for it later in your presentation. And that insight is going to come from lots of different sources. It's going to come from your own personal insights and your experience. It's going to come from any customer insights that you've received as part of the brief. And then there's also third-party research that you can do. So I guess some examples of POVs, which again, you might want to take notes of. Maybe you've been tasked by a client to look at why their employees are demotivated, and the client's current belief is because they're not paying enough and they've scrapped their bonus scheme. But actually you do your research and you've got some insight and you believe it's because of a different reason. And so one POV you might use is actually you'd say this to the client. So yes, dear client, you currently believe that salary and bonuses are a key driver of employee disengagement. When we delve deeper into employee satisfaction, we often find employees are demotivated because of a lack of recognition and personal goal setting. And so you're pivoting and you're reframing what the client thinks is their current solution to one that is based on your insight. And this, it's not about creating a new problem that doesn't exist. So actually, if you did your research with the client and it really was a salary and bonus issue, then you would stick to that and you would reframe it in terms of the solution. But if genuinely you've done your research and your insight tells you that there's a kind of bigger or different problem, that's where this POV comes into play. So moving on to stage 3. In stage 3, we use the word overwhelm as part of the story arc. Challenger used the word rational drowning, which I just find as quite extreme. So we soften that a little bit. And as we discussed at the start, customers do their own research. They're overwhelmed with information. So this step is not about overwhelming the client so much that it leads to decision paralysis. So again, there's a fine balance to all of this. But you want to give them, basically, you want to quantify the impact and you want to prove that the POV that you've just presented is true. And you do that with data, and ideally this would have data and graphs. At the moment we don't have that. You'll just be talking to us when you present this back. So examples of this might be, over the past year, our clients in your industry have experienced an average cost increase of 30% due to outdated technology. If we're thinking about that employee engagement example, you could say 70% of employees value recognition over bonuses. So wherever your POV is, you want to use this step to quantify the impact of your POV. Another example could be AI automation can save your team on average 10 hours per week. This translates to over 500 hours annually, showing your employees, allowing your employees to focus on more strategic initiatives. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. There's lots of different metrics that you could use at this point. So we're going to break out into breakout rooms again. You'll be with the same people, and we're going to cover stage 2 and stage 3. So what is the insight that is going to grab Bayer and WeConnect's attention? What have they not thought about that in your experience they're overlooking? And what could hinder this event from being a success? That's how you're going to express your POV. And then you're going to quantify the impact. So once you've decided on your POV, you're then going to decide some stats around how you're proving that insight is true. Remember, you can make the stats up. We're not expecting you to go off and Google research. You're in a very luxurious position that you can be creative. So yeah, feel free to be creative on those stats for the purpose of this exercise. We'll give you 5 minutes and then we'll bring you back in the group to do a bit of feedback. I'm going to ask how that one was. There was a lot less time this time, so I'm sure it did feel like a bit of a rush. But yeah, have we got a volunteer who is happy to share their step 2 and 3 with everybody?
I can take a stab at it for feeling crazy.
Oh, Daniela, thank you for being brave.
We'll try.
Yeah.
They're kind of combined together, but one idea we had was, so for this event, of course, you're very interested to make sure that it's a success, especially as it's the first showcase of this mentorship program. But really, it's an opportunity to bring the organization together for kind of gendered events and really make sure that it's not just women connecting with each other, but that we really have full participation from buyer teams and really make sure that it's an inclusive event. And with the current stat for gender-related events, only 17% of the participators are male. We think this is a fantastic opportunity to set an agenda and a theme that really encourages participation across the entire organization.
Brilliant. And yeah, that's a great one. Bayer and WeConnect have asked you for logistical support for food and drink, which you could have gone back to them and gone, yep, here's your schedule, here's the food menu choices, we'll bring in some third-party staff, which you'll do as part of your offering, but instead you've positioned yourself as somebody who cares about the success of the event, has thought very carefully about your target audience of women, and has put yourself in their shoes and furthered the strategic agenda that both Bayer and WeConnect have in terms of promoting women owned businesses, and also Bayer's objective of promoting women within their organization. So yeah, that's a brilliant example of a POV. Great stats too. Does anybody else want to go through theirs? That's okay. We've only got 3 breakout room groups, so it's okay if you're not have to share. We had a great one as well yesterday from somebody in the group who also, their POV was that events like this are often the full stop, and actually in order to fulfill the objective of mentoring and promoting women, they should think about the event, what happens after the event. So they would organise the event, but then they would also think about what should happen for this group of women afterwards, which again, taking what is very kind of logistical brief and making it more strategic and tying into the client's goals. Okay, you did fantastic. So let's move on to step 4. So you have presented very much a rational argument so far. You've got a POV, you provided numbers. Now it's time for the emotional impact part of the problem. So you do this by creating a narrative that's very familiar and shows the customers how companies similar to theirs are currently suffering or not being as effective as they could be because they haven't committed to challenging the status quo. And the human story really needs to be the story behind the data that you present, and it needs to help explain to them what will happen if they don't correct course or what is happening in their organization today. So I guess one example of this could be something like, let me share a recent story from one of our clients who faced a similar challenge. And you could talk about the emotional toll it took on their organization. You could even bring in case studies or like video testimonials of employees or sound bites from qualitative research. So yeah, one idea I had when I did this was I went through the exercise myself just to make sure it worked. And so my POV was going to be around creating an event that was all designed from the woman's lens, including a food menu that was designed with women in mind, thinking about the spaces that women might need, especially if they're new mums or if they're going through the menopause. And so actually my making it personal story was fabricated for this exercise, but it was going to be small sound bites from women who had attended events and maybe they couldn't find appropriate areas to breastfeed, or their mentors had abandoned them as soon as they walked in, so it required better support from mentorship, etc. So it's those kind of human stories that we're looking for. And then the next stage is all going to be about introducing a generic solution. And I know it's really tempting at this point to present your solution, but there is a benefit to explaining to the client what is available. So if you explain the solution in a generic way, the customer gets to understand that there is a solution to their problem. And they get to do that in an unbiased way, which means that when you come to present your solution, that they are more favourable and open to listening to it, because they don't feel like you've worked up to this part to then just go, ta-da, here's my wonderful solution. So at this point, you want to touch on some of the generic solutions that are available out there. And also by doing this, you're showing that you're confident that your product or service is actually stronger than what's out there. So by the time you get to your final step, the client will be very much listening to your solution, and you can also build into this step how your solution is differentiated. So moving on to the next step, we're going to do 3 in this breakout room. You would now introduce your specific solution. So the goal of this final step, you've waited all that time, you now finally get to talk about your solution, its unique differentiators. You provide your customers with the understanding of the service you provide, and you want that service to be able to exceed both their expectations that they set out initially and also the status quo POV disruptive world that you've outlined for them. So here you would introduce your products and services, you would talk about your value proposition, and you could be prepared to mention credentials such as awards, feedbacks, any metrics or stats that you've got to prove that your service is credible in this space. Okay, so we're going to move to a breakout room. And we're going to work through steps 4, 5, and 6. You have only got 5 minutes for this again, which I appreciate is a short period of time, but hopefully 5 and 6 should be quite complementary and quick steps to work through. So we'll move you to breakout rooms. So do we have a volunteer who's going to go through steps 4, 5, and 6?
I think our group hasn't said anything yet.
Okay, Elizabeth, do you want to put forward your
try.
4, 5, and 6?
Right. Yeah. I think we've been built a lot on that point that we brought up before about this sustainable event, that it wasn't just an event that was just going to happen for one day, that was actually a sustainable event that you want to, that everyone's investing time and money in, and we want to see that then really growing into something big.
Yeah.
In terms of the standard, I think that often is the way, we know the competition is bringing in.
Oh, hang on. Excuse me, Elizabeth, we're just struggling with your audio. I don't know if you
can't hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there somebody else in Elizabeth's group who could explain the?
Yeah, I could maybe step in there. Sorry, Elizabeth. So the idea behind it was that we've been to events before that are like events, people get together, they have a really nice evening together, and then that's like the end of the journey. And so that would be like, and for this, we could then create an event for you where we hand out the awards for the mentees we would like to go about it, that we say this is the beginning of a new journey together, or carrying on the journey together, because we'd like to to then also offer the possibility for the people, for the guests who come there, who are all women-owned companies, for them to connect together and find their mutual path for the future, so they will carry on. So they can build relationships there. They can not just with Bayer and with WeConnect, but amongst each other, and find like who fits together, who can benefit from each other. How can we make each other grow into a larger, more successful?
Yeah. And so how does that then translate into stages 5 and 6?
Whereas 5 and 6. So the new way would be, oh yeah, sorry. So which did we have that, Elizabeth? I can't remember. Yeah, so there we would like also have like breakout rooms where you could like, so you would know beforehand, everybody would have then the information on each of the companies or each of the people who are coming there. So I would like know as a marketing person who's a company producing things, who would be interested in connecting with marketing agencies. You'd have that maybe beforehand, and maybe you have breakout rooms there where you could find who would be of like business interest for you.
Yeah. And so is that the generic solution, or
We really liked that would be like our solution. We didn't get that far. What we really like is your solution, when you said you had like thinking of the women with it, you have like breastfeeding areas and menopause areas and whatever. And we were like saying, okay, how could we maybe translate that into bringing companies together so that you create a strong network. But we didn't get all the way through the steps.
No, that makes sense. So I think the bit that you're missing actually is the generic step. So you've got a clear idea of your POV, you know how you want the event to look like. So you've got the stages of 3 and 6. But I think the way to make 6 more powerful is actually explaining to them that you could have a solution with an events company, with breakout rooms, etc. But what we do differently is, and then you'd explain what you do differently in terms of your breakout room.
Okay.
So the group that I just joined, actually, I wonder if you want to go through your 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, I could start up with it. Sabine, you step in with our USP then, and I start the first part of it. Let me share an experience, a recent story of a client we just encountered. And it was a similar event, and it was all regional products. Everything was labeled as Bayer and regional and good stuff. But they provided coffee and chocolate, and all those products will never grow next door, but it was still labeled regional. And this is something we see pretty often and at those events. And then you always think about, is it just like labeled as green or as very, very good? And this is something we do different. Sabine, you might step in.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So we have a new way. We have a totally new way because we balance the miles. So we can tell you every step the ingredients have been traveled and where they are coming from. So you can really see on a little plate at every meal how many ingredients are inside, how many miles they have been traveled. And additionally, we bring the farmers and women farmers, especially, on the stage. So this is our really different approach, and no one else can do it like we do.
Yeah.
And no one wants to have events without coffee. So we will provide coffee but from an initiative in Kenya, women-owned, and we know where it comes from.
Yep. So again, really great on the differentiation. Everybody's skipping that generic bit. So don't forget to remember to talk about the generic solution. Okay, so we're going to move into breakout rooms one last time for 3 minutes. And I just want you to bring together your entire pitch based on everything that you've learned in the session. And then we'll come back and we'll ask one group to do all the steps from 1 to 7. So think about the feedback. Don't forget to introduce that generic solution. And then we'll run through somebody's pitch all the way from start to finish. Okay. Okay, welcome back. So a quick breakout room then. I know, I bet you didn't think you were going to work this hard on a Tuesday morning. So who would like to put forward their pitch?
I can volunteer us as tribute.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. And also Elizabeth, yes, I appreciate you wanting to volunteer, but not having great audio. That's okay. So yeah, Daniela.
Okay, so apologies, I'll be trying to read from my terrible notes, but thank you so much for this opportunity. We're very excited as we have a lot of experience with leading global organizations like yours in the corporate event space. And we know you're really looking for this impactful event that we're sure we can deliver. And additionally, as a women-owned business, we are incredibly attached to this topic of mentoring women. And so we also bring a lot of our personal connection to events like this. And I know this is an opportunity to debut this mentorship program as part of Buyer and We Connect program. But we really think this is also an opportunity to better engage kind of the entire organization at Buyer to really support these women. And we've seen that, and the industry has seen that gender-related events only bring about 17% of male participation. And to really make this mentorship successful and this event successful, we think there's a greater opportunity to build an agenda and program to really bring both genders to this discussion and amplify the impact of this program. And from our side, we've attended events, gender-related events, and we've really seen how it's full of women meeting with each other and how the impact could have been so much greater if we were more, or if the program was more inviting for men and we had a better structure. And while we know that there are many solutions you can pick from, a lot of event planners out there, ranging from helping you plan birthday parties to weddings to just corporate events. So we know that you have quite a bit of solutions out there. But what we can really offer is this perspective of making a gendered event more equitable and more invitational to really, again, make sure that we can bring this impact and really launch this quite successfully where the women feel supported and we have the full organization of Buyer behind it to really make sure that satisfaction is there after the conclusion. And so with that, we would be very grateful if we could be invited to the pre-screening video call with the other agencies and look forward to any questions.
Amazing. Well done. Yep, you hit every single point on there and you didn't forget your generic solution. So thank you. Really nice point of view, and again, bring in, actually you brought your human experience and your personal experience throughout the whole pitch, which was really nice. So yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to the video pitch shortly. Before we do that, we'll just do a final recap of this framework. So yeah, next slide, please. So I mean, thank you very much for your patience, energy, especially as I know some of those breakout rooms were very short, but the breakout rooms I entered, it was great to see you all passionately discussing how you could position yourselves differently for this event. I mean, like all frameworks, this is just one person or two people's perspectives in the case of the writer based on their research. I've included a link in the Q&A that we'll send out so you can do your own. But I think one thing to take away from this is that I hope you've learned something new potentially about what you could add to your pitching process. And if there's one thing that you, or maybe two things that you take away from this, two things that I found really effective is that POV piece and that next steps and close. So if they're the only two steps that you do from this framework, I would strongly urge you to follow them. Okay, so moving along to the video pitch. Okay, so as you know, we have 30 women enrolled in the program so far, and 15 women-owned businesses will be selected for the mentorship program, and you'll be matched with mentors at Bayer. So the selection of mentees will be based on a video pitch. That video pitch will be 3 minutes long, and in there we'd really like you to include footage of your product if possible, or service in action, or preferably including use cases that are relevant to your intended audience, which in this case is Bayer. This should be about your business. Please disregard the RFP that we've spoken about today. That's not what this video is about. We'd also like it if you were present. So voiceovers are great, but there's always face-to-face contact is definitely always a good thing. So if possible, it would be great to see you within that video. I have been told there's a great piece of software called Loom, which you can do this, but actually please don't worry about the quality of your video too much. It's really about the message that we're focused on and how you're going to differentiate yourself and also appeal to Bayer based on the solutions that you offer. So we do have a few tips that you might include. Sorry if you are a video agency and this all seems very simple, but I think some things to consider is just making sure that you've got good lighting and audio connections, especially so that way it makes it easier to review the videos for the people who are watching it. So yeah, think about whether or not there's background noise, or think about if you are demonstrating your service and you're within a warehouse environment, then for that section you might want to consider a voiceover because there might be too much background noise. Also be mindful of filming in front of windows, etc., and having your face in shade. We don't expect you to have video cameras and lighting equipment, but sometimes actually I close my blinds for these sessions because otherwise I get pestered by delivery drivers, and I have a little lamp just so it's not too dark. So there's lots of simple techniques that you can do at home or within the office just to make it a little bit more polished. We have had questions about whether we can show the entire team or company. We ask that it's ideally just one person. Clearly, if there's a co-founder, then like 1 or 2, but there's nothing to stop you using the rest of your team to help you do this, whether it's filming or editing, etc. But it doesn't have to be edited and professional. You're not going to be judged on the professional quality of the video. Again, it's more about the message. So some final considerations. Your pitch video should look and feel unique to your business. So that way it's memorable and it makes your business credible. And please end your video on a call to action, or you'll miss an opportunity to communicate what your intention is with interested stakeholders. In terms of submitting the video, we will send this all out in an email, but we're asking you to send a link, not an attachment, because there can be issues with firewalls and size limits on email. We're happy for you to share that link in any way that you feel comfortable. We know some people use Vimeo, some people prefer unlisted YouTube links. We transfer Gmail. Please use whichever software that you feel happy using to send that link. We'll of course let you know if there's any challenges with that. And once you do have that link, if you could email it to Andrea on her project coordinator email address, that would be wonderful. The closing date is the 5th of May at 5 o'clock. We know that's a Sunday. The original deadline was the 4th, but we've extended that because we won't be reviewing it until Monday. Although I know that we've had some questions on this call about whether or not it could be pushed a little bit more. We'll confirm again via email. We'll see if we can get you any additional time, but for the time being, please work to the 5th of May. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Are there any questions? I can see there's some chat messages. Nope.
One question on my side, but when we show, what the agency does that mean I can follow the presentation? I mean, under 3 minutes. So do we just talk what we do, or do we show like examples or?
I mean, it's up to you. So you could talk through what you do, and we don't need to see the examples, or you could choose maybe to record it in Zoom, and you might have a presentation and you could show examples of your work. If you were going to do that, I would
Sorry, I
switch.
can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. So
Yes, I can hear you now.
it's up to you. You can do either or. So you could talk about your services, depending on what you sell, or you could show them. If you are going to show your services, you could record it in a Zoom call or in a Teams call like this. The one thing I would urge you to do is not to just talk through a presentation. It would be nice if we saw a little bit of presentation and we saw you talking directly to the camera. So you might not want to present for the whole 3 minutes. But yeah, that's
Right, okay. But if you talk the way through and explain what you do, then that's also fine. So just like you as a presenter and just without getting case studies. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for today. Again, just thank you for everything. We understand there's been a lot of content to get through in the last week or so with all the training in terms of pharma sustainability and this session. And this session in particular was very interactive. So yes, please do get in touch with Andrea if you have any further questions. We'll send this recording out and I'll send in any resources. I'll also put my LinkedIn in there, so that way if you do have any questions about the framework, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, good luck with the video pitches.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.